Hi, I'm Trisha Selgrath. Join me while I paint this beautiful mountain stream from start to finish. Sope Creek is located near my home in Marietta, Georgia, and there are so many beautiful things to choose from. I have decided on this view looking up the river. I like the composition with the big boulder and the little waterfall. As usual, I'm coating my surface with burnt sienna because I'm doing an outdoor landscape. And I am painting on masonite, cut 12 inches high by 18 inches wide. This is my palette. Feel free to freeze this frame to make a note of what I'm using. I'm using some leftovers from another painting. I'm quickly sketching with charcoal, and then I've taken a brush and gotten rid of the excess. When you start out, keep your strokes very loose. I'm just laying in sky, very loose background, way off in the distance. It's very blurred back there. I'm not trying to lay in any detail back there, just some basic lights and darks. One thing I really want to emphasize to you on this one is half this composition is in shadow and half of it is in sunlight. And so you're going to see as I go through here that most of the composition on the right side is in shadow. Now there's a few little bits of dappled light that comes through, but I'm going to be treating the greens on the left very differently than I treat the greens on the right. You can see that very obvious right here, and you'll notice I have a lot of shadows with the blues and ultramarines mixed in with my greens on the right to really emphasize that that is shaded on that side. I'm kind of jumping around and putting in some of my highlights and shadows, kind of establishing where those are. That's one way that I'm sketching as I go, and then I kind of just fill it all in. Keep in mind, way back in that where the stream is coming down, your tones are going to be much closer together. You're not going to have as bright whites and dark shadows. And then as it comes forward down toward the bottom of the painting, you're going to get much brighter, or I should say more contrast in your lights and darks. I'm just kind of still sketching at this point. I'm laying in basic shapes and colors. Notice on that rock, rocks in general reflect a lot of light. So keep in mind that all the rocks that I'm going to be laying in here, I'm not just thinking about the color of the rock itself. I'm thinking of what the color of the ground is under it and what colors it's reflecting on top. So on my second layer, I'm coming in and laying in a little bit more definition on how far back things are. I'm still being very, very painterly, very loose on all of that back there. The further away, the looser it is, okay? Now, when you look at if you go back and forth to the photograph, it looks a lot sharper in the photograph, but I'll remind you over and over again, I am taking artistic license. And here's the branch of that tree. I'm just giving you a feeling for what that branch is. I am not trying to lay in all those leaves. I'm just giving you a feel for what that is. I am not trying to recreate that photograph. I'm giving you the feeling of that photograph. And, all the trees and all of that, I'm kind of laying in what's there to give you the feeling of what's going on. But I'm not trying to lay in every rock, every branch, every leaf. It's just that feeling that I'm trying to recreate. And frankly, I'm making it a bit more dreamlike than the photograph that I'm seeing. So you're going to see that my colors, especially those off in the distance, are a little bluer than they may show in the photograph. And that stream, I'm just indicating with a few strokes of what's there, trying not to get very caught up in detail. Now, as it comes forward, I do get more detailed. And I do want the viewer to know where that scene is. I think I'm giving you enough information to know where that is. But I'm not getting caught up with every rock. That sort of thing can just drive you crazy. If you get into that, then more power to you. I just, at this point in my life, I just am trying to to give you the feeling of the area without all the detail. Now that big boulder back there will have less detail than the little rocks in the foreground that I'll eventually put in. It's further away, so I'm keeping things that are further away less detailed. Now you will see something that I do a lot, and that is I often will soften my brush strokes with my fingers. I can't say that that's a good habit to get into, but I do mainly use hues, which means that even though something says that it's a cadmium or cobalt, if it says hue after that, that means it's not really using those toxic minerals. But I still, wash my hands and everything right after. I wash my hands through this process a lot. So even the trees back there, I try to soften them. I'm just trying to give hints of them and hints of the foliage that's coming over the top. And that's a very layered process. You'll see I'll kind of jump around a bit, but over on that side, still cooling down a lot of the leaves over there. Now that little highlight back there where the sun's hitting it, later I come back, I realize that it's too much of a bright ball. It's drawing too much attention. So later on, you'll see how I come back and I change that. I didn't notice it right off, but that's one reason why I think it's so important to let your paint sit overnight, get away from it, come back, and take a look at it the next day. Things will pop out at you that you just are not seeing in the moment. So I'm going through and just laying in rocks here and there. I'm referring to my photograph a lot, but not getting caught up with the shape of each rock. I'm more concerned with creating a good translucent water and what color that water is and what color those rocks are as they come through that water, trying to recreate those colors much more than the shape of each rock. Now here I'm reflecting the sky when I do that light coming toward us. Yeah, working on some of those rocks over there as it's coming, again, coming toward us, working out the lights and darks of areas. Again, even over in that area, I made some big changes, not huge changes, but some changes the following day because things just jumped out at me when I took a fresh look at the painting. Nothing that was terrible, it's just I saw some different things. I think you just reach a point where you get tired. Now here, this is important, the way that I'm doing those rocks in the foreground. Can you see how I've laid in some purples and reds and blues and greens? I'm really building in a variety of backgrounds that are going to show through the rocks. And then I'm putting in a variety of shapes over the top. And that's very much a layered process. Now I'm working on a few trees back there. I'm working in the leaves, balancing color. I'm bringing some of the purples and those red hues up into the leaves. Greens can get way too green if you don't balance them with some warm tones. Well, over there is kind of a sandy spot, but it does have some little rocks and stones. So again, I'm balancing some of that green with a little bit of orange and red. Bring in a little bit more definition as it comes toward us. Getting my fingers in there. Maybe I don't know, maybe it's a bad habit that I have. It would be really bad if I was using, toxic cadmiums and everything. But most of my paints are not horrible. Kind of bringing the sparkle of the water over. I'm trying to get the blue reflections from the sky, but also getting some white in there to sparkle in that foreground. Soften, soften, soften. Translucent water is so much fun to paint and challenging to get the look of those rocks at a depth in the water. Got some little bitty rocks in there. With your rocks, it's important to do such a variety of sizes and colors. That's going to add so much to those. Now I have, in the foreground, I have cerulean blue in my palette as a warm, reflective color. Just building, building, building. A little bit of detail, throwing stuff in there. Not worried about, so much what exactly is there, but I know there's texture back there. So I'm throwing some strokes in there to mimic that texture. Now in here, working in those rocks, going back in. Some of the darks I thought needed to be a little bit darker. So laying a few more darks in there. When you're doing that, don't forget some of the red tones. Burnt sienna, cad red hue or orange. Get some of those warm tones deep down in the crevices of the rocks. And then you also, you balance those shadows with purples and blues. And then build the color, build and build and build. So you concern yourself with the color that's underneath, and then the colors of the rock itself, and then all the reflected light on the surface of the rock. It may be reflecting green from the foliage, it may be reflecting sunlight, yellows and the blues from the sky. Rock is highly reflective, and so don't forget to put a lot of interesting color in there. That's what brings the painting alive. If I had painted all the same colors on those rocks, it would just be boring. And it's fun. It's fun to add all those colors in there and make interesting rocks. Kind of build all that up and make it come alive. You're balancing the composition too. You're bringing colors into those rocks in the foreground that you have in other places in your painting. And your eye will bounce around the composition, and it will pick up on all those different colors that you've put in there. Now I'm focused on putting little highlights of dappled sunlight. It hits the foliage, it hits the rocks. And that dappled sunlight really brings a composition alive. It just adds so much. Good lighting in your composition is really important. I've pointed that out on several of my other lessons, how important it is to start with a good composition, looking at the lighting in it. Now I'm adding volume to those rocks, and I want those to feel like you could that it has several sides to it, that it has a lot of depth to it. And it's a process, and like I said, I actually quit a little too soon, and when I looked at it the following day, realized that I needed to add more. This is, by the way, the following day when I'm in there retouching things. I realized that trunk needed a little bit more separation from the boulder that is beside, and that boulder needed just a little bit more something in it. And just kind of added to the rocks and put my finishing touches on it. And what I love the most about doing these things is feeling like I'm there and just enjoying being in that moment. And here is the final painting. And I hope you have enjoyed this as much as I have. Thank you so much for joining me.